Falls for All Committee for Thursday, February 20th, 2025. On February 20th, 2025, acknowledged that sacred land, which Smiths Falls is now located, has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We're grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. I will call the meeting to order at 9:03 a.m. I'm looking for a motion for approval of the agenda. Moved by Nicole, seconded by Diana. All in favor? That's carried. Looking for a motion for approval of the minutes from the December 12th meeting. Moved by Diana and Nicole again. Doesn't matter, I guess. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Ask for disclosure of monetary interest. Seeing none. We have two delegations today on the same theme. We're really pleased to have Dana Douglas, who's a registered dietitian, public health nutritionist from the Southeast Health Unit. Welcome, Dana. If you can, we'll look forward to your presentation. If you come to the podium for it, please.
Do you want me to start now?
Pardon?
Do you want me to go now?
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Okay, well, thank you for having me today. I've pulled together a presentation on food insecurity and tried to highlight the local context for Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. So in the presentation today, I've included a definition of food insecurity, so we know we're all talking about the same thing. We'll look at the impacts that it has. I'll touch on the nutritious food basket costing and the cost of healthy eating. We'll look at some solutions for addressing food insecurity. And at the end, I want to make a quick note about food access. So food insecurity is defined as the inadequate or insecure access to food due to financial constraints. So food insecurity is not an issue related to the accessibility nor the affordability of the food itself, but rather it's an income-based issue, as those experiencing food insecurity do not have enough income to be able to buy enough nutritious food to eat. The Public Health Ontario snapshot data from 2021 to 2023 indicated that 15.5% of households in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark experienced food insecurity. So on this slide, I've included a chart of who specifically is experiencing the highest rates of food insecurity, and that includes single parent and single person households, children, renters, and Indigenous individuals living off reserve. Just over half of food insecure households in Ontario relied on employment income as their main source of income, and over 58% of households relying on social assistance experienced food insecurity. So these two stats in particular really highlight the inadequacy of both minimum wage and social assistance rates. So not being able to afford enough nutritious food to eat affects the health of individuals, families, and our communities. Food insecurity means not getting enough of the vitamins, minerals, and energy from food that we need to maintain good overall mental and physical health. Compared with adults who are food secure, adults experiencing food insecurity are more likely to have poor mental health, such as depression, mood and anxiety disorders, and increased stress, poor physical health, including worse oral health and higher risk of infectious diseases, injuries, and chronic diseases. And food insecure adults are also more likely to have a shorter life expectancy. Children in food insecure households are more likely to experience poor mental health, including hyperactivity, inattention, anxiety disorders, depression, and suicidal ideation. They have higher risk of developing asthma, experiencing negative impacts on their academic performance and social skills, and have poor nutrition, growth, and development. The negative impacts of food insecurity are far-reaching beyond that of the individual level, with food insecurity having costly impacts for our community and our population as a whole. So healthcare costs among food insecure adults are more than double that of their food secure counterparts. This is because adults experiencing food insecurity are more likely to be hospitalized with a longer length of stay and a higher risk of being readmitted. They are more likely to be forced to delay, reduce, or skip prescription medications because they can't afford them. And this, as you may guess, leads to worsening health conditions and greater use of the healthcare system. They're also more likely to have difficulty managing existing chronic health conditions, and this is due to financial constraints associated with affording prescribed medications as well as adhering to therapeutic diets. Okay, so now I want to introduce the Nutritious Food Basket costing. So this is a standardized food costing survey tool that public health units across Ontario use to monitor the cost of healthy eating as well as the affordability of food. So the survey tool consists of 61 food items that together form a nutritious diet, and these items are based off of National Food Guide recommendations as well as common food purchasing patterns of Canadians. So each spring we go into grocery stores across Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark, and we record the price of these items. This allows us to calculate the cost of healthy eating on a monthly basis for different age and gender groups. And we can then compare these food costs to different income and expense scenarios, which allows us to monitor the affordability of food for different individual and household makeups for those living in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. So June last year was the last time we did costing, and then this spring we'll do costing again. So as of June of last year, the cost of healthy eating for a family of four for a month in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark was $1,196. So this was a 5.8% increase from the same time frame in 2023. And this family of four refers to a male and female between 31 and 50 years, a boy between 14 and 18 years, and a girl between 4 and 8 years. On the slide, I've included a visual depiction of one of the scenarios that I had mentioned on the previous slide. So in this scenario, our family of four is receiving Ontario Works. So this family of four would receive a maximum monthly income of $2,916. So after we subtract the cost of rent, which for Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark is an average of $1,964 for a month for a 3-bedroom unit.
Can I pause you there for a moment?
Yeah.
That would include the Canada Child Benefit, I assume?
Yes, so this is if income taxes have been submitted and they've received all the maximum eligible government subsidies. So once we've subtracted the cost of rent from the monthly income, this family would be left with $952 for the rest of the month to pay for food and all of the other expenses that they might have. So you can see from the numbers on the chart that the amount of money that they're left over with is not enough to cover the cost of food, let alone all the other expenses that they might have, which can include heat, hydro, transportation, insurance, school supplies, childcare, clothing, footwear, over-the-counter medications, toiletries, household supplies, the list goes on. On this slide, I've included a depiction of a few other scenarios for individuals and households living in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. So what we've done is subtract the cost of rent, which is shown in the blue bar, and the cost of food, which is shown in the reddish burgundy bar, from the amount of income that an individual or family would have. And this gives us the amount of money that's left over, which is shown in gray, for everything else. So you can see that the amount of money that's left over after we subtract food and rent costs really varies depending on the scenario. So in particular, if we look at the top left, which is the family of four we just discussed, the top right, which is a single pregnant person on ODSP, and then below that is a single person on Ontario Works. So these scenarios in particular all have a monthly deficit. So that means that the amount of income they receive is not enough to cover both the cost of food and the cost of rent. So these scenarios I find really highlight how food budgets are often sacrificed when money is tight in order to pay for other expenses. And that's because food is often seen as a more negotiable expense compared to other expenses like rent and hydro, which are not negotiable. So, what can we do about food insecurity? We know that food insecurity is a complex and a multifaceted issue with poverty as the underlying root cause. Addressing food insecurity requires systemic income-based solutions that alleviate poverty. On this slide, I've included some examples of solutions that together can work to eliminate poverty, and they include ensuring social assistance and minimum wage rates provide for the cost of living, expanding income tax filing initiatives for low-income households to ensure access to eligible government subsidies, implementing basic employment standards to reduce precarious employment, and encouraging local businesses to become living wage employers and supporting those that do. So what can municipalities do with respect to food insecurity? I've included a few strategies that can be implemented at the municipal level on this slide, and they include advocating for federal and provincial governments to implement income-based policies and programs, facilitating local level initiatives that increase economic resilience for individuals and families living with low income, such as free income tax filing assistance and targeted supports for access to and training for jobs with livable wages and benefits, and collaborating with partners in various sectors to determine local priorities to address food insecurity and poverty. On this slide, I've included a few recent examples of what other municipalities are doing in Ontario related to food insecurity. So as I'm sure you all know, recently city councils for Kingston, Toronto, and Mississauga have all declared food insecurity as an emergency in their respective cities. The recommendations in these motions all included some similar themes, which I've pulled out onto the slide here, and I'll just briefly touch on. But they were to request the provincial government increase the base funding for school food programs and invest in expansion of these programs, and request the provincial and federal governments commit to addressing food insecurity, increase or index social assistance rates to inflation, invest in affordable housing, and build a stronger workforce by improving working conditions, creating better labor laws, and improving worker support programs. So before I conclude, I do want to make a quick note about food access, as food access is often mentioned in relation to food insecurity. So when we refer to food access, we are talking about programs like food banks, community and school gardens, community meal programs, and other food literacy type programs. These programs are all great resources for our communities. They provide support and food to people who need it, and they also promote skill development. However, these programs do not alleviate the income constraints that are the root cause of poverty, nor were they meant to. I do want to bring your attention, though, to a couple of resources that we have in our community, because we do have individuals and families who need support here and now. So the first is the Food Corps LGL Food Inventory, which I've included a snippet on the top of the slide. So in the food inventory, there is a help for getting food section, which lists out the food banks and various community food support programs that we have throughout Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. And then the remaining sections of the food inventory list the abundance of other food-related resources, programs, and tools that we have tri-county. The next is the community and meal calendars that are put out by the health unit. So these outline all of the low and no cost meal programs that are available by location, and they are updated by the health unit quarterly. So that is it for me, unless anyone has any questions or thoughts or comments.
Well, thanks, Dana. And very meaningful presentation, and one that brings deep concern. And I recognize this covers the whole Lanark, Leeds, Grenville region. And if I go back to one of your earlier slides, the percentage of people who are struggling with food security. I know demographically our community probably struggles more than most. We have probably 20% of our citizens who are relying on ODSP or OW for their income. Of course, many children within those families. And so obviously from what we see here and what we knew, I guess they're deeply food insecure. And then we also from the working population, and especially those who are working on lower wages, they're also have a very difficult time trying to feed themselves healthy. And it's concerning because we know, as you illustrated, the long-term health effects are profound. And the best upstream thing society could do would be to ensure that everyone has nutritious food and can meet their nutritional needs on a daily basis. And on the long term, we're probably being a much healthier, much more community and country and province. But anyway, at that, I'll just turn it over to anybody in the committee who has any comments or questions. Diana?
Just wondering, you mentioned that the numbers on our slide here for this image here are from June 2024, and that they'd already increased 5.3% since 2023. I know you haven't done the spring check yet to see how much it's increased, but I was wondering if the health unit has any inkling of how much more this has increased, just because I'm assuming now the gap is even greater than we're seeing last year.
Yeah, we don't have any numbers or anything at this point. I could say my personal opinion from my own experience, but we do the costing every spring, as that's when the market is found to be the most stable, and it's not impacted by as much by seasonal variations and what the products that we have available. But as I'm sure everyone can imagine, with everything that's going on internationally with tariffs and all of that, that I'm sure we will see some differences this spring when we do the costing again.
Joanne?
Thanks, Dana. That was great. And I'm always like, I know we do this every year, but I'm always still like astounded when I see that image. Like when you see the numbers in front of you, what the difference is and how people really can't afford to eat nutritiously. This is kind of going back to the grocery store question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but how much control or non-control do grocery stores have over their pricing? Like, is that independent or?
I'm not sure the answer to that question.
I was just curious, and I know that's not the solution, because I think the message here was that it's an income-based solution that we need to be focusing on. But I feel when people are going to the grocery store, that's where they're sort of seeing it right immediately in their face. So I was just curious on that. But thank you. And
food insecurity is it's a reliable marker of material deprivation. So even though in this specific instance, as a dietitian, I'm talking about food, but we can use it as a marker to indicate deprivation of other needs as well.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Peter?
Just thank you. I'm just glad that we aren't still pushing. Like, I love community gardens, and people can always learn to cook better, but I'm so glad we're not throwing those old soldiers out as the solution, because that's the general public really believe if we only had more community gardens, or somebody could just teach me how to cook better, this wouldn't be an issue. So I just want to dispel those myths. They're important, but they have no way have the impact that income changes has, or affordable housing. So they're favorites to throw out, and please, I'm so glad we didn't do that today.
Yeah, and research actually doesn't support the notion that individuals experiencing food insecurity have lower food skills, and oftentimes they actually have more food skills and literacy compared to the general population, because they are forced to work within the confines of a budget. And ultimately, food skills doesn't really matter if someone cannot afford to purchase the food in the first place. So if they can't buy the food, it doesn't matter if they know what to do with the food or not, because they can't get it in the first place.
Thank you. Anything further? Well, Dan, thank you very much. And I'm glad you put a slide in there about what municipalities can do. And I think we're committed to doing what we can, I think in many ways. And as with our budget approved on Tuesday this week, I think it's about 200,000. Over 200,000 we have contributed towards food insecurity in our community since 2019. Break it down, it helps, but obviously there's a long way to go. And advocacy, the income is I'm glad you brought that forward, is really the biggest issue. That and the cost of housing. And you put those two together, and the rise in rents in recent years have limited people's budgets and left nothing or very little for food, as you've illustrated. And we did lobby the Provincial Ministry of Family, Children and Community Services January last year regarding OW and ODSP rates. But again, we can do that probably twice a year, and it seems like there's not always a listening ear, or at least not the willingness or ability to make any changes that are necessary. But it reminds us we have to continue on this fight and this advocacy and do what we can for our citizens. So again, thank you for being here, and I think you've really set the table very well for our next delegation. We're very pleased to have coming in virtually Elaine Power, who's a professor of from School of Kinesiology and Health Sciences at Queen's University. She's been an incredible leader when it comes to the fight against poverty, an author with regards to the merits of a basic income. I've met Elaine a number of times, and I'm really pleased to have her here today. And also Brandon Talazzo, who is a City of Kingston councillor who has led the fight against food insecurity in Kingston, and really led the effort to have Kingston make the declaration, which we will hear more of here shortly. So I'm not sure who wants to go first, but welcome Elaine and Brandon.
Brandon and I had a little side conversation, decided I would basically reinforce everything that Dana did in her excellent presentation. But first, I didn't prepare a formal presentation, but I would like to thank you, Mayor Pankow, for your leadership on this issue and poverty more generally, and also the members of the committee. I really appreciated Peter's comments about gardens, and it seems like Smiths Falls is pretty leading the way on this to the extent that you can. I've been studying food insecurity for over 30 years. And in that 30 years, we've accumulated a mountain of evidence to show what the issue is and what causes it, which is material deprivation, lack of income, and lack of income security. In that time, in that 30 years, the evidence base has really grown, and I don't know whether to burst into flames in anger that nothing has changed, or to cry because we have all this evidence and it's done nothing, at least in Ontario, to affect policy, particularly around social assistance rates. Just the work that the public health dietitians and nutritionists do to produce these food costing tools is so powerful, and it's so important, and it's actually more up to date than the food insecurity rates, there's always a fairly significant lag in terms of the data collection and when it gets analyzed and released. So I think what those food costing scenarios show is the literal impossibility of having a reasonable, this is a very basic diet that they're costing for, and it assumes that nobody's eating out, that you have food skills, that you have the equipment at home, and it just shows how impossible it could be to have a roof over your head and food on the table. A single person on Ontario Works is at 36% of the poverty line. I mean, that's obscene in my estimation. Some of the other things I just wanted to pick up, one of the big changes especially over the last few years, is the rise in people who are working, who have employment income, who are food insecure. And I think, that relates to the dramatic rise in the cost of living and the lack of, the fact that wages haven't kept up. The other thing that is just devastating, really, is the persistence of childhood poverty and childhood food insecurity. Nationally now, we have at least 2 million children living in food insecure households. And, I'm, as you would put together, I'm old enough to remember the 1989 House of Commons unanimous resolution to end child poverty by the year 2000. I mean, that was unanimous across all parties. And here we are in 2025 with 2 million kids. And so one of the things I'd like to add to Dana's list of possible solutions is actually targeting the Canada Child Benefit. The federal Liberals have rightly boast that they've, brought hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty. But why is any child still living in poverty in this country? And why was I, on my Queen's salary, getting a Canada Child Benefit? That $100 a month that I was getting made no difference to my child's food security, but it could make a profound difference to the food insecurity of other children in this country. So I just would like to add that to the list of Dana's recommendations. the other small point I'll make before I hand it over to Brendan is that, we often look to food bank statistics also as an indicator of what's happening on the ground, and that gives us some idea. But we know from research that only about 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 5 people who are statistically and quantitatively categorized as food insecure actually go to food banks. So even, food bank demand has soared. We've seen, the news headlines over and over in the last few years of the increasing demand and the inability of food banks to actually meet that demand. And food banks are also now starting to ask government or plead with government for income solutions. And so just that the food bank is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the actual real need. And they cannot, just as community gardens are no solution to food insecurity, food banks are not a solution either. They cannot address the underlying problem. So I think with that, I'll stop and hand it over to Brandon, but I'm happy to hang around and take questions if people have questions. So over to you, Brandon.
Thank you. And thank you. Elaine's been an awesome partner in this project. I just want to give a shout out to Smiths Falls because my in-laws are from Smiths Falls and they still live on Montgomery Street. I met my wife in Smiths Falls, so I have a deep affinity for your town. I've also gotten held up on Abbott Street more times than I can count. So that is... I know your town extremely well. I visit there probably once every 2 weeks. So I love Smiths Falls. And I'm really delighted to be part of this delegation. When I got the email, I was just like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to tell my wife that. So I love your town and I'm there very frequently. So I'm going to just sort of talk about the context in KFL&A in Kingston. I serve on the board of directors of Kingston Frontenac Public Health. And I'll just give you like a bit of data and where the trajectory is going, anecdotal information, and then I'll talk about why we use the language of an emergency. So in 2017, 1 in 11 houses were food insecure in Kingston. In 2022, that was 1 in 9. And last year, that was 1 in 3 houses were food insecure in Kingston. Just to give you an idea of how that sort of trajectory is going. The need has gotten greater, and it's due to obviously inflation, the pandemic, and the cost of housing as well. As we know, as municipal councillors, we're out in the community. So last December, I was out in the community doing some food work, doing work through the food bank, and I just saw the need escalate compared to any other year I've been on council. And a lot of the people who were needing these services were kids. And, if we can't help kids, we're doing something wrong as a community, right? And it was both this data and this personal experience that led me to dig even deeper of what exactly was going on. Now, the city of Kingston, for what we're doing everything we can. Part of our strategic plan to deal with food insecurity. We're supporting local pop-up markets, just to give you an idea of some of the things we're doing. We have different pop-up markets, different days of the week throughout Kingston for people to access. We have low cost and prepared foods as well. We're assisting the St. Vincent de Paul Society with a fully new site to help feed people. We even have a portion of parking tickets going to food banks. So I often say to people, don't park illegally. But if you do, a portion of it is going to food banks. We have a Fines for Food program. Yeah, it kind of says when you have a $15 ticket, okay, well, $5 is going to help feed somebody, so people feel less bad about paying their parking tickets. And in this budget alone, we committed $200,000 to address food insecurity. Let's be clear, it's not enough. As Elaine has talked about in the previous delegation, municipalities, as you all know, are highly limited on what we can do. We can't run an operational deficit, and we really can't deal with the structural problems with these Band-Aid solutions. And they are Band-Aid solutions, but we have to do something. We just can't ignore the crisis. Why did I put the language of an emergency? So Kingston City Council has declared an emergency now on 3 occasions: a climate emergency, housing and homelessness emergency, and a food insecurity emergency. If 1 in 3 households cannot meet basic needs for healthy food, I don't know what else to call that but an emergency. And one thing I made sure of our motion is we sent it not just to levels of government, but to everybody, whether they were in opposition, whether they were in government at the federal and provincial level. Why did we do that? Because it is my perhaps ambitious and perhaps naive assumption that we can still achieve great things as a country. I still think we can solve big problems. When I take a look at how we got single payer healthcare, you know how the story of that was it started in Saskatchewan with the NDP. It was matched dollar for dollar by a conservative, John Diefenbaker, and made law of the land by a conservative. The hidden story of Canadian healthcare is it's something everybody from every political party can be proud of. It's something that can unite us as Canadians. And I fundamentally believe if we can address food insecurity, it doesn't matter if it's from the blue team, the orange team, the red team, the green team, it's a Canadian problem and we can find a Canadian solution. So I sent that emergency declaration to everybody at all levels of government. I still think as a country we can achieve great things. Maybe I'm naive. I think I'm hopeful and ambitious. I think if enough municipalities do this and we put pressure on government, we're in the midst of a provincial election, we can get parties to begin to put policy platforms forward. Kingston City Council has declared its position. We support universal basic income. That's the position of our council. But as the previous delegation spoke, there are a number of different policy tools we have available that can help mitigate food insecurity. This is not solvable at a municipal level, but it's something I think we as municipal councillors can put pressure on at the provincial and federal level to address this issue. 1 in 3 households are food insecure in Kingston, and I know that the stats are similar for Smiths Falls. There are very simple solutions that we can do to try to fix this. And I am encouraged for the fact that this is getting a lot of traction in other municipalities and getting provincial and national attention. So thank you for your time. I'm pleased to take any questions, but I just want to give an outliner of where the political landscape was for us. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Brandon and Elaine. And thank you for your leadership in Kingston and how hopefully this creates a tsunami of declarations across the province and across the country. And I'm very confident we will see one emerge from this committee to go to our council in the very near future. I'll just, before I open for questions, just to speak to the 1 in 3. And I think we're certainly probably even more food insecure here than what we're seeing in Kingston. When 58% of households rely on social assistance for food insecure, but we know it's a big portion of our population. The last census, we had about half our working population earning less than $32,000 a year. So essentially a little over minimum wage. So those households are probably all very food insecure as well. So it's very concerning. And your leadership here, again, as I mentioned, is very appreciated. So I'll open it up for questions and comments. Joanne.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm just curious, when you sent your communication to state of emergency to everybody, did anybody or who typically responds? What happens at the other end of that? Because I'm not familiar with that process.
Yeah, no one. So such a great collaborative relationship we have with our provincial and federal counterparts. No, so that's not uncommon that we don't get a response back other than an acknowledgement from our clerk's department. But what I think strategically we tried to do was by saying it to everybody, we could go to the media and say, we've sent it to everybody and they haven't responded. Much of the effort, as you may know, when you're dealing with a municipal level of advocacy is to get as much attention as you possibly can. And it is worth noting that this motion got the attention of CTV News National and it was featured on the National at CBC. And it did we did get a response from the Conservative government. So they did put out a response to CBC saying that they had done some work on ODSP. So we kind of did shame them, but it took the media putting pressure on them to do that. And I think that's really being very practical. We're not probably going to get like policymakers coming up and addressing this because they may not. But if the media puts enough pressure on them, you will get a response. And that, I think, if we keep the tsunami of motions going, I think that's really the strategic goal of declaring an emergency.
Thank you.
Peter?
Sure. Thanks very much, both of you. And Brandon, you and I sit on the Southeast Health Unit Board of Health, not the Kingston Fund. But just to talk about you brought up Medicare and the fight. There was a 10 or 15 year battle before Saskatchewan picked it up. So it's a long, long fight. The other thought is, and I'm older than everybody, in different times, we would go through cycles of prosperity in the country and then perhaps recession. And what often happened when we went back up and we were doing well, everybody moved up a little bit. So my point is, Canada and Ontario are doing relatively well financially. But in this time, when we're doing better, the people most vulnerable and a significant population are not rising with the boat. They're actually, it's going the other way. So that is the unusual situation, and it's complex, I understand. But other times, and I've seen that, I worked before Ontario Works was called welfare, and I was a welfare worker. And you would see as the economy got better, the numbers would drop, people would find decent middle-class jobs and move on. This time, the economy's doing well. Many people are making a lot of money, and yet this population is really, really struggling. And I don't have the answer to that, but it's obviously, talk about inequity. It's a huge, huge challenge, structural, as you said. Just a comment.
Thank you.
I don't know if the professor wants to comment on that or not. If there is there.
I would love to comment on that if I may.
Certainly.
When you're living at 36% of the poverty line on Ontario Works, I would say that in and of itself is a disabling. It's a structural disablement. Like you can't, the stress of trying to live on, it's about $800 a month with all the Trillium benefits and the GST credit and all the rest. Your brain is malfunctioning because you're not properly nourished. Your brain is malfunctioning because you're so stressed. You probably, you can't afford any kind of, dental care, for example. How could you afford a nice outfit to go actually even apply for a job, right? So I think that kind of deep, deep poverty is keeping people trapped on social assistance. Also because people stay on social assistance because you get drug benefits, which they can't access if you're working at a low wage job. You're probably working or precariously. You don't have access to the healthcare benefits either. So I think there's a fair bit of research that shows how people really get trapped, and that's one of the reasons why I think Brandon would agree that we think basic income would be a better solution. The Ontario basic income pilot that the current government canceled, even that, it was set at 75% of the poverty line, and that was about a doubling of most people's income. And the kinds of benefits that people saw, including food, but their health benefits are just staggering. I could go on for a long time, but I'll stop there.
I'll share your book with the others here, Elaine.
Thank you.
And I guess to your point, we know that we had a presentation at County Council Community Services Committee last fall, and I think it was 80% of people on OW in Leonard County are waiting for ODSP. So it's not just they're being held back about $800 a month instead of the $1,300 and change that would have an ODSP. But in many cases, I think to your point, there's an inability to even contemplate working due to the conditions that they're in. Diana?
I just wanted to thank you both for your presentation. And also, I really appreciated that you mentioned that the food bank statistics don't tell the whole story for food insecurity. And one thing I think I'll mention is just how easy it is for folks who are I guess the two of three, at least in the Kingston context, to fall into food insecurity. I think of my brother and sister-in-law who just moved to Smiths Falls in December. She's pregnant, they're about to have their first baby, and he fell at work and broke his leg. And so now he's not able to work. And because he was on a break at work, they are denying his insurance claim. And so now she's going on to mat leave at a reduced rate. She's extremely stressed. And I've seen just how quickly things can snowball. And so we've picked up their grocery bill because that's something that we're able to do and we're in a very safe position. But she's working for Canada Life. There's no reason why there should be any food insecurity he was working a great job as a manager at a long-term care home. But just one injury alongside some other life changes of just moving into their first home, expecting their first baby, and all of a sudden there's some really, really big challenges ahead. And it's going to be an uphill battle as she reduces her income even more going on mat leave. He finds a new job that has like reduced physical skills. Like it's really like it's so easy for anybody to end up in a food insecure position. And I know for a fact that they think they're not in the position to go to a food bank because they think they don't have enough need. And so that's why I really appreciated you mentioned that the food bank doesn't tell the whole story, because it really, like, there are a lot more folks than we think who are struggling, who think they're not struggling enough to reach out to some of the supports.
Thank you. And to our food bank, in fiscal 2020, they were serving under 400 individuals a month, and now they're regularly serving over 1,000.
Okay.
If I could just speak to the food bank issue also, is that the food banks are going to break. And I think that they can't keep experiencing. So in Kingston, the food bank had 10% year upon year growth of its need. In Ottawa, they had to cut 50% of their contributions to 98 food programs. So the need is so great, as you're saying, a lot of people who have wages are relying on food banks. It's only going to be a matter of time that food banks keep meeting this need. And one thing I would emphasize with declaring an emergency is that the Kingston Food Bank actually got an additional $100,000 due to the national attention we got from declaring a food emergency. So people donated from Ottawa and Toronto to the Kingston local food bank. So it did have this ripple effect as well of helping stabilize our own food bank. Having said that, it's only a matter of time if this need keeps growing that food banks are going to crack and break and have to reduce their services, because so many people are relying upon them as a stopgap for not having enough to eat. So yes, people need to get to food banks early, but we also have to be aware that food banks are getting at capacity of what they can deliver.
For sure. Thank you.
Not a lot of sunshine here. Sorry.
Yeah, and they're still not meeting the needs of
Yep.
70 to 80% of people, like the speaker's relatives. And there's so many people who are relying on relatives to help them get through right now. It's a bit terrifying, actually, and especially considering what tariffs might do to the economy and the cost of food. So yeah.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions?
I really appreciate everyone's speech today. Dana, also Elaine and Brad. It is really eye-opening for sure. And I have been there myself. I came from a shelter. I was on food bank. I was on Ontario Board. So I have a personal life experience of how life could be for those people. But what I also have noticed, or did notice during the time, was that like food insecurity is just part of a multifaceted picture. It's food security is only part of it. When it comes to poverty, it also part of it is culture. Like I always think, like, if people in this type of families, less privileged families, if they have some money even for food that is given to them for food, they would rather put that on the other needs that they have. And then, because as you just mentioned, Dana, food is something that they can, for themselves, they can just put it aside and take less for food and put it on the other non-negotiable necessities in life. So I think in municipality level, I was just thinking as everybody was talking, like what we can do, because it has always been on our table. We are talking about this as one of the main issues that our community is facing out there and how Smith Falls for All community can contribute, even if we cannot eliminate it altogether, but we can help it at least to alleviate part of it for people. And what I'm thinking is that maybe as municipality, like the town could be more involved in terms of, instead of facilitating that money to the families or basic income, because still they would decide to put it towards the things that they cannot postpone paying, to consider a basket for each family based on the number of the family members and the age of them, so that they there is somewhere that they can go receive that basket per month. I think that would, then they know that this is the food and we can count on it for the months. Also, something that comes to my mind, these people, when they have that little budget, the culture is still, for some reason, is missing. Like, most of that budget goes to cooks, to like non-nutritious diet. So I think as like dietitians, something that could be done is that to come up with a pamphlet of how we can make good food with most affordable food items, so that people move away from processed food, from canned food, from junk food per se. And then because not everybody can afford going to a dietitian and get those recipes. I have seen those recipes out being given to senior families, but in Ottawa, but not for everybody. So if that comes out, at least moms can be educated of how to make that food, better food for their children. So there's few items that needs to put together. And also, you were talking about like your sister-in-law's challenge. Now I'm thinking, like, if she wanted to ever go back to work with a little kid, well, that's not possible. But can we also reach out to the employers and think like how you can possibly support your employees so that they can still have a center in their office, for example, to have their kids while they're working, so that that can help them to take a little bit of their concern from paying for daycare. So there are things that I think different organizations have to come together to. Also, like we can reach out to our farmers, to our dairy producers here, to see how they can contribute. Like we can bridge to them and have them even come and talk here, how we can work together to provide that, the food basket for our families with a lower cost, even if it's not for free. So yeah, there are so many things. We need to put our minds together and just come up with a list and start from there. I think this is a long process, but it is doable. And thank you again.
Thanks, Mitra. Back to Elaine's comment, I guess, regarding universal basic income. I actually ran it as well. And we did review that. Our committee endorsed the resolution, which went to our council, which was supported. And the evidence is right here in front of us with old age security and GIS, and the fact that in the presentation from Dana, that although there's less discretionary income left over, there's money for rent and food. And so that GIS and OAS, of course, is a universal basic income for those who are 65 and older. So the evidence is very strong, and Elaine knows this far greater than I do. I just have one final question for the two of you, and I guess it's and if Dana wants to weigh in as well, because I think so we look at where we are today, and we know that food insecurity and the high cost of housing is deeply impacting our community. I think it's affecting the mental health of our citizens. It's affecting their physical health. It's putting pressure on our healthcare system. It's probably leading, in many cases, to despair and substance use and all these factors. And Elaine's been studying this for 30 years, and I think you'll comment on it, but the conditions today are worse than what they were probably 30 years ago in many cases. But where are we in 5 or 10 or 20 years if we don't turn the tide? I don't know who wants to go first.
I as I said before, it's like, do I, explode in self-combust in anger, or weep in despair? I can't imagine even 5 years time. Given what we're facing right now, I hope people will start marching in the streets and demanding that our governments do more to support the most marginalized among us. And I hate to think what this current threat, from south of the border is going to do to us. But what we've seen over the last month is that it has helped us, think of how we're different and who we are as Canadians, and to kind of emphasize that, one of our primary differences is that we traditionally have liked to look after each other. So, I mean, that gives me a little bit of hope and a silver lining, but I can't even think what I mean. That we're having this conversation in one of the richest countries in the world, one of the richest countries in history, it just kind of boggles the mind. And it goes back to the previous point about the growing income inequality, and the fact that a few people are doing really, really well. And there's a piece in the news today about the transfer of trillions of dollars in generational inequity as the boomers start to die and hand that money off to their children. That income inequality, unless we do something to address it, is going to get much worse. And I can't even imagine what that will do politically to our healthcare system, or to our communities. It's ripping us apart, and I think we need to really start to recognize that. Sorry. It's not a pretty picture.
No.
Reality.
I will say something I think that keeps me going. I'm a parent of two. Like, I've got two wonderful kids. I've got a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. And just because things are terrible now and have been for a while, it doesn't mean that the future is bleak. One thing I've really become aware of being involved in politics is who's at the table at different levels of government really does matter. And just because things look like a big hill to climb now, it doesn't mean that it's an impossible hill to climb. If you said to people, 100 years ago, we have universal healthcare in Canada and a single payer healthcare system, they'd probably think you were nuts. I still think that we can achieve great things. Like, I now pay less for childcare at a daycare for my daughter than I did when my son was in daycare. That was a policy decision that took a long time, but it was made. The child tax benefit, that has reduced child poverty. It's not perfect, but it's helped. These policies can be put in place and they can help mitigate it. The fight is worth having. And I know sometimes it seems like a really impossible fight to have, and that we're just kind of screaming at the wall sometimes. And I get frustrated too, but I look at my kids and that just makes me even more enraged and empowered to keep going. So that's why I'm doing anything I can to try to get and address this issue. Keep fighting. Like, what else are we going to do? Just lay down and say, oh, it's a life of despair? No, we got to keep going. Like, that's what we're elected to do, and that's what we need to keep doing. So don't give up.
Great. Thanks so much, Brandon and Elaine. Really appreciate your willingness to be here today to share your understanding, your wisdom, and your passion. The committee is going to move forward and discuss this now as our consideration for a declaration of an emergency. And you're welcome to stay on, or you have other things to move on to. That's fine as well. And Dana as well. Appreciate everyone's effort today to help give us the understanding we need to carry the ball now.
Thank you for having us. And I love your bike lanes in the downtown. Keep those. Those are awesome. So I know you've gotten feedback. So yeah, I've loved to see Smith Falls grow. It's such a wonderful town. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Dana. So pretty incredible presentations to get our day going. It took a while, but incredible information there, and understanding and passion. And I think as I alluded to within the presentation, what is being experienced in Kingston and across this region is more profound here. I truly believe it is, unfortunately. And so huge numbers of our citizens are struggling. So I think we have, as a municipality, have a responsibility in more ways than one. And I mean, the one is we do put some money towards food insecurity, and we support the Falls Food Hub. This year was $25,000 for the community meals that happen Mondays right now at Hanley Hall. I sit on the steering committee for that, and we're to the point now where we'll soon start renovations for the permanent space on Chambers. There's some incredible fundraising occurred that enables the money to be there. So just doing the planning right now. That'll open up to additional meals, but it's all going to be based on support of the community and the number of meals a week and the supports and resources that are provided to that to that organization will really be based on the type of support that the community rallies around and gives. So there's things that are happening, but it's modest, right? There's 100 people going for the meals on Mondays, which is great, but there's probably 1,000 who could go there and enjoy a nice hot meal. The food bank, I think as Elaine said, there's a lot more people who could use the food bank and benefit from the food bank who don't get there. Transportation is a barrier in town. There's a lot of people who just don't have the ability to go to the food bank and get their food and walk home. It's just not practical. Challenges are profound, but to Brandon's point, we can't give up. Yeah. And the bigger the hill to climb, the harder we have to push. So everyone has seen the Kingston's declaration. And I want to open it up for conversation here about the thoughts about that. What my recommendation would be is that we tailor our declaration to Smith Falls as best we can with some of the data that we have locally, probably partially from the health unit, a little bit more regionally focused, but based on our demographic information we can draw from our last census, based on information from our food bank and what's happening at the Falls Food Hub. And make a prepared declaration that we can advance to council for consideration, hopefully support. So at that, I'll open it up for discussion. Peter?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I would support the committee recommending the council do this. For me, that's really important. For me, it's more about the process around that and how, the declaration is the easy part, but how do we frame it? And Brandon was talking about what the expectations were with that. So rather than just declare it, it's more, for me, it's about all the opportunities by declaring that creates. So that's where I'd like to put the effort. I'm already on the declaration. That's easy, but it's more than what, or how do we get the biggest bang on that return?
Great point.
I agree. I think that we're definitely we should put forth the declaration. I kind of have a secondary question. I know a couple months ago we did put something forth for basic income. Could we kind of retouch on that as one of our hey, we not only do we have this declaration of emergency of food insecurity, but we're also one thing that we're really trying to champion is basic income, because basic income could help a lot of these problems. So is that something else that we could bring forward?
Well, that should be part of our declaration, right? That the provincial federal governments move forward with a program to develop universal basic income.
Yeah.
Diana?
Yeah, I think in combination to what Peter and Nicole is saying, it's I'm 100% in support of making this declaration, and I think we can include a call to action. And it's the call to action that is, we're not just declaring it, we need results, we need change. And we've already come forward and said we need universal basic income. And I wasn't on the committee at this time, but did this go to all levels of government at that time? Okay, did we get a response at all?
I don't think so.
Because if we didn't, then in the call to action, I think there needs to be a little bit of a petty sentence of, we've also made a declaration for universal basic income to which we've received no response. This is in combination with that not only are we not done talking about this, but we're doubling down because the issue is more profound. The way they described it as a deprivation of need, the language there, I was like, this is a universal deprivation of a need that there's no reason for this to be the case. And like you were saying, Peter, I find the conversation is often around sunshine solutions, a beautiful community garden, a space to gather, even a beautiful new food bank. But it's but this is not enough. People need money to go to the grocery store. And in Smith Falls, we have a food desert on one side of town where there's only the giant tiger.
But anything beyond that, trying to go towards where the theater is, there's no grocery store there. And because we don't have transportation, folks they don't have access. What they do have access to is the Circle K. They have access to the Tim Hortons, the Burger King. Those provide snacks. Burger King and Tim Hortons provide some food. Giant Tiger does have a fresh food section, but it's not as large as Food Basics. The Independent is like, people are priced out of there, so I'm not going to include it. But even the Walmart, all the way on the other side of town, for the new buildings that we're putting up that are the lower income, they don't even have access to a grocery store that can provide sufficient food. Like, it really is. I feel like now I'm tanging off on the different issues we have, but it's like, there's a call to action that we can make.
And I think to what's been said, I mean, it's one thing to make a declaration, it's one thing to have that call to action.
Yeah.
And measurable actions we can take going forward to try to ensure that we do make a difference. And Brendan saying they didn't receive a response, and so then they went to the media saying they didn't receive a response. I think in our call to action, we can include that we would like a response, addressing the concerns that we're making, and if and when we don't receive one. Then when we're doing more public media attention, we have a very large, profound case that's very clear, the need in our community. And now we can say, we've made a call to action, we've requested the government, different levels of government to be involved, and if we haven't received a response, our case is now even more profound, like them having attention on CTV News resulting in the Conservatives responding to their motion. It's unfortunate that that's how the games have to be played, but I do think that's where we end up. It pulls the heartstrings of people watching, and then you get larger cities like Toronto and Ottawa donating to their cause. So I could see that being the case here for Smith Falls. He had a very positive attitude about our town. I'm sure others do as well. Do anything? Mitra? And then Peter. Mitra, then Peter. Go ahead.
Just for the committee to be aware that just because we bring it forward, it doesn't mean it will pass either.
Yeah.
We have a very thoughtful and caring council, but I've been in meetings with thoughtful, caring people before, and these kind of issues don't go always the way you want them to. So if you're familiar with how council does these things, those whereases are really important.
Yeah.
And I think we would have to, if we decided, I'm not saying soften up council, but help educate council and the public as to why we're doing it. And then, so there's a process on there's a political side to this.
Yeah.
And
Could one of us, or could someone from, that's very well, versed in the food insecurity space to talk on it before we bring it to,
oh yeah,
like, could we say, hey, look at this? Because I know after these conversations, I was like, wow, I feel doomed. Like,
Yeah,
it was heavy. I'm like, oh, and then if we were like, okay, feel this. Okay, here's what we can do about it. Like, here's this declaration.
Yeah.
Could that
one
kind
more
of,
thing we can do. It's not the end.
yeah,
Just always know that
yeah,
there's pushback. It's not guaranteed. So we have to, the mayor doesn't always get what he wants. It's surprising, but
More often than not.
as I say, they're a caring group, but there's politics. For me, it was to get it sooner because then the provincial election's only a week away, but
yeah,
I would rather do it well than quick,
yeah.
Mitra?
Well, they also mentioned that our speakers, our guest speakers today, and also Peter actually put a highlight on it. They have been trying to talk about it and bring it up to the attentions for the last 30 years. They are still the A point. So I think we need to just not to ignore that process as we move forward with that process, but that's not giving any immediate effect visible in our community. So I want to bring back the attention of what we as Smith Falls for All community in our little corner can do for our community. So and then let the process go, like take its own time. But what we can do, because that's the way that we can come with feasible solutions that we have in hands that we can do. So I think we need to come up with, and I was just typing for myself, like what are some items, action items of what we could do. And then also bring everybody's ideas and put them together again, give it to Carrie to come up with some action items, and then take it from there to start some solutions in our community. We know that this is kind of nationwide and then global, but what we can do for our community, we can't just wait forever. That's my point.
Do we have any limitations on how many times we can take something to council?
Well, if it's the same thing, probably, yeah. I would say
Okay.
if there's a new twist to it or a new priority, then we can bring it back again. But like it would really
Like a little tweak.
once if it's so maybe expand on what your thought process is.
I'm just thinking about like let's say we do this declaration of emergency and there's some feedback like, hey, not right now, or this needs to be tweaked. If we were to take it, make those adjustments, and then bring it back.
Okay. If it wasn't supported.
Yeah,
you mean?
like-
Okay.
Yeah. Could we bring it back at that point? Okay.
Joanne?
Just a question about declaration of an emergency. Do you think it's the emergency piece that will sort of like set people like, is this truly an emergency? Or like how often do you declare an emergency, or have you declared?
Very rarely.
Yeah, so
Right. And
yeah, so
and
I think
Brandon's
the
got to-
context.
yeah. I'll let Peter comment first because he's sort of initiated the conversation here regarding council reaction and stuff.
Send it to Peter.
It just there are people that just believe, and we've seen it in meetings, that if there are jobs out there, if people really wanted to. So there's a lot of blaming going on, and so so that's very real, and I understand it. There's also very real the old charity model, right? I feel good because I gave food to the food bank and it makes me feel better. And I don't have to worry about policy change or advocating. So the old charity model is what we've had for 100 years. Poor people are fed by people and they should be thankful. And so we're trying to get away from that model. And so that was ingrained. So what we're shifting to is a structural policy change, which the experts have talked about. That's where the solutions lie. I'm not saying the Band-Aids aren't important, but so it's an uphill. That's why it's not. That's why we haven't gotten it. It's people just don't accept it, or we can't afford it. And I think the mayor raised a good question: what if we don't do this? So understanding the cost of that. But this is an investment. It's not a cost. You're investing and you get returns on that investment. So it's hard shifting that, but.
Do we have updated population statistics on like what percentage of people in our community are, multifamily, or how many kids they have? Because I would argue that like this model is so visually amazing. I would say a very, very high percentage of the families I work with have more than 2 kids. So bringing in our, declaration of emergency, actual statistics that we say, not only do we have people living in food insecurity, but, 33% of the population X, Y, and Z. 50% of the population has 6 kids and is living on, I think that if we also came with statistical data to say this is why this is so important to us, I think it would be that push.
So to your point, Peter's point, it's those whereas that can be very important to inform council. And just to build on, I guess, Julianne's question and Peter's response, there's provincial responsibilities, federal responsibilities, and municipal responsibilities. And when I came on to council 14 years ago, I think it was, there wasn't a lot of blurring of the lines as much as what there is now. And so we've moved in recent years into areas, whether it's because the province has neglected something and we've stepped in, or the province has somewhat imposed something on us and we've had to respond to that. When it comes to our pillars, really, right? But that doesn't mean there's always going to be universal support. There may be people on council here or council elsewhere that would say, well, that's a provincial responsibility. We don't need to get involved. It's a federal responsibility. But so I think that's where it's important that the statement we make reflects our community. So that's something I would suggest if the committee's okay with it, Carrie and Peter and I can work on putting together a tailor-made declaration for Smiths Falls. And then I don't know if we want to wait to bring it back to the committee for support. I guess we'd have to come back if we're going to have a resolution of support to advance it to committee of the whole, right?
So we've got, because this meeting was delayed, we have another meeting, I think, in 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah, that works.
we could craft something. I've crafted a couple motions in my day, and we can bring something back to the next meeting, which I believe is on, is it the 12th? I have it on the agenda. 13th. Or
Yeah, I think it's
13th.
March 13th.
So then we could bring that then to the next
That's
committee of the
March.
whole.
Okay, I think that makes sense, and that's okay with everybody. But and it's a matter of, I think, how do we get our provincial and federal leaders to put a focus on this? And I'll use the one example. Provincially, there's, assuming the Ford government's back in, there could be $80 to $100 billion spent on a tunnel under the 401 to alleviate traffic and to save some people time in their commute. And $80 billion could go a long way in the fight against food insecurity. So obviously it's not as important as freeing up a little bit of time for who do that commute into Toronto in and out every day. So so how do we get the attention at that level to ensure that they recognize that an investment in food security today is going to create not just a healthier population today, but all those long-term benefits as Dana alluded to in her presentation, or spoke to in her presentation, how we're going to be a much healthier, much better society down the road if food insecurity is dealt with effectively. So I think that's okay. We'll work on that. We'll bring it back in a few weeks. And I think what we'll probably do as well in the meantime, once we have a draft, we can circulate it for any comment.
Sure. So
that when we're ready in 3 weeks from now to essentially support it and with some action items attached to it. Okay, so let's move a little bit ahead. We're running behind. We may not get everything done today. Allyship pamphlet, Carrie?
Oh, sorry. So not everybody, but for the most part, I got maybe 5 or 6 contributions for the pamphlet, and I had combined all of those and sent them over to Nicole. So I'll let you.
Yeah, Mitra and I have looked through we both got the document, as well as I believe it was sent to Chris. We are planning a time.
Did you send it to Chris for her to see?
No.
The responses
I will send it if
I haven't done.
Okay. We will meet in the very, very near future before our next meeting to talk about kind of the consensus of what the answers were. So some questions were very clear. Everybody had the same answer. Some questions, the answers drastically ranged. So Mitra, Chris, and I are going to plan some time before our March 13th meeting to kind of discuss the consensus and bring any updates at that time.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Sorry, just to in alignment with that, with the food insecurity and also like the call for the food emergency, do you think that would be something that we can put it also in allyship pamphlet?
Really? Yeah, we could definitely.
And highlight also.
Yeah. Like being good neighbors
depends on the
includes.
span of what we want to include in that.
Yeah, how narrow or how broad you want it to.
If it's a trifold or a booklet. Yeah.
I guess we'll leave it up to the three of you probably the two of you to figure that out and look forward to coming back. Okay. Planning for 2025. priorities, delegations, events, just to get some ideas on things we want to have as
The calendar.
meetings.
Events, also the budget. We were going to talk about the budget.
Yeah, budget was approved, and we have,
We put 5,000 in. Budget was approved the other night, so we do have some funds set aside for events we may plan, any printing needs we may have. So there is some money in the budget. So this will be a baseline this year, and we'll see, you know, how we spend it, what we spend it on, and see how more appropriately we can budget in 2026. So the 5,000 was just a number that the mayor and I both had in our head. So that's what we asked the treasurer, and council is supportive of that. So we do have some money to actually do something constructive with this year.
Can we carry over budget if we had some budget from this year that we didn't use for the next year?
like, from this year's budget to next
From the
year.
5,000, yes. Like, how does it work? Like,
Generally
if we-
not.
What happens to the
yeah,
remaining?
it basically goes into the year-end
Back to-
surplus.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would end up going into reserves.
Okay.
So I guess the point is, I'm sure we'll find a way to use up $5,000.
Spend it.
Look
Sure,
into
we're
it.
not gonna spend it.
I was thinking of food basket. Maybe we can come up with something for the community to just. I don't know.
Okay. So priorities, I guess I don't know if we need to deviate from our pillars. It's more a matter of how do we continue to advance each pillar and the work that we can do and the work the municipality can do to make a difference, right? I don't think so that's the priorities. I don't see maybe a change here unless someone has a comment or suggestion otherwise. And then delegations.
Yes.
We had 3 outstanding delegations today, and very relevant. Going forward, if you haven't got any thoughts today on delegations, simply, I guess, email us, submit them in the future, and if you've got anybody you know or anything you think we need to address that we could have here. We've had some really positive delegations over time from numerous organizations, but again, I think we're always open to trying to learn and be informed so we can move forward the best we can.
I think we do have, Manager Grenke, a plan for next month to discuss the additional residential units and housing that he spoke to this group before, but there's been a lot of turnover in the group. So he's coming at the next meeting. I postponed him from this meeting so that we could focus on the food insecurity. So we do have him booked. So if anybody has any other ideas, let me know and I'll connect with
One
them.
thing, it might be good with Carl here at the time, but some municipalities have passed a renovation bylaw and a renovation bylaw
Yeah.
opposing renovictions and trying to ensure that we protect our citizens and those who are renting. It's a lot of controversy surrounding it. I think Hamilton, I don't think passed it yet or not, but they've considered it. Or maybe Hamilton passed it, but another place was considering it, but there's also the cost of having to really work this, almost like you need staff members in order to be able to ensure that you're following through. But I'll do some work on that in the next month, next few weeks.
That article.
Pardon?
There was an article in municipal news that I get, and there was a municipality, and I don't know, I can't remember if it was in Ontario or not, but they passed something regarding renovictions.
Okay.
And I thought I had sent it to you and Carl.
I'm not sure, but if
Double
not, send it
check.
again, please. So I think it's something we can look at. I'm regularly still hearing from citizens who are being told they have to move out because their landlord told them he's going to renovate the space, and we know the vulnerability they're left with. And if they're paying $800 or $900 a month for rent now and food insecure, I mean, they're not going to be eating at all if they have to pay $1,500, right? So it's all so much tied together. So I'll also see if we can work together on this, Carrie. If we perhaps a delegation from someone relevant to that topic, and maybe the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness might be a good one.
Legal Aid Ontario, they also have a community outreach program in their clinic.
Who is that?
Um,
Legally, yes.
Legally.
Yeah.
So we can invite there, even if they they may not be able to just travel to Smith Falls for the session, but they can be online with us to just give this opportunity to
Yeah,
talk with
Linda
us.
Bell
about-
provide.
Yeah.
She's spoken to you before.
She has, and I've reached out to her 2 or 3 times to no avail because I know she is very busy, but I haven't had any luck getting through to her to come as a delegation, but I'll persevere.
Yeah, I can reach out to her too. We touch base.
You might
regularly.
have more clout than I do.
Well, we tend to talk about once a month at least, I think, unfortunately.
I do have connections too, in case you wanted. I can
Okay.
reach out to them as well.
I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah. Okay. So again, other delegations, let's keep that in mind.
I was thinking about WAC, bringing our youth center facilitator in to help share the voices of the youth in the area.
Absolutely.
Give us a different perspective.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
So Mayor, in line with our food insecurity, can we reach out to our local producers as part of inviting someone to come and talk with us, or how we can, if that's a possibility, that we can speak with them to see how we can do something together.
In which type of producers?
Dairy producers and farmers, like if we could just have them, or do they have an organization that we can reach out and get them come?
I don't know. Do you have experience from the food hub? The Three Rivers Food Hub?
Yeah, well, you could always go to the Dairy Federation of Agriculture, and they'll have local branches and people.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are, and then just through the food bank, they're very well networked with. Yeah, they're all independent business people. So
Yeah.
they're,
It's in the region, I guess. Like Miller's Bay Farm is an example where they do a lot of produce, but they're but beyond that,
See, like
there's a couple others maybe around, but
sorry.
Mhm.
The problem that I see is that always like the produce goes to other steps before it gets to people. So basically, I am thinking of if there is a way that we can shorten that distance between the producers and the community as the suppliers and the people that are using the produce, so that we can reach out and connect with these people. I know that there are regulations in terms of how to produce and how to get them to the grocery shops, but I was thinking like if we can just reach out to our producers and speak with them to see if we can manage and some sort of way aside from the standard way of doing the business to get the produce to the community for much lower cost. If that's something that we
I think most the producers locally would be right from farm to consumer. So the ones we have locally would actually sell directly to consumer.
True.
Yeah, so I don't think there'd be, but maybe to Peter's point, somebody from Kenny Federation
I
of
know that'd be a
Agriculture.
short of time, but maybe that's something that we can look at in our next sessions of how we can, if there are any ways, or if we can invent a wheel for that, so that we can just, this middle people, they can go aside and we can just meet the producers and see what we can do within the law. Not something that is not, because I know that like for dairy producers, they can't sell dairy
No.
so
it may be beyond the scope of this committee. That the kind of work you're talking about is,
does that go to council?
no, I think
No,
it's
we-
beyond the scope of,
Provincial regulations.
well,
on how
it's
to
just,
do it.
that's all. There are people doing this, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
There
I
are-
know
we
that
already-
they sell if they want
Everybody's,
to.
yeah, no, everybody's trying to get lower cost in
True.
groceries, so it's,
So because
I just don't know if it's the mandate of this group to do that.
So keep in mind future delegation. Okay, Diana. Sorry.
I don't know how relevant this would be for this committee, but I know a lot of the Lanark County paramedics who live in Smith Falls, and also they have the community paramedic program. So when I'm looking at our pillars and I'm thinking like social sustainability, and we were just talking a lot about like long-term health consequences of food insecurity, they have direct access into the homes of like our most vulnerable in our community. And so I think they could have a very interesting perspective on the type of need. We could ask potentially like their superintendent of the community paramedic program to chat with us about the positive results they've had. It's been getting a lot of very positive attention in the newspaper, but it's being conflated as, okay, so we have less need. We don't need to pour more budget into the paramedics, but it's actually, they're diverting folks from the emergency room by providing care at home. I don't know if that fits into our committee here, but when I'm thinking, who are my connections? I have a statistically unlikely amount of paramedics in my life. So that's my only connection really to something that I could think could be relevant. I don't know how relevant that sounds to folks.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Peter.
It is related, but just to build on that, the our Community Health and Wellbeing Plan, which has all the 4 pillars in it, is about to be launched. The updated version. It's sort of, the paramedics are a big part of that, and there's a feature on them among others. But that one, they're coming to municipal council soon with the plan and presenting it, because it has to be adopted. But this committee, I think, if you wouldn't have seen it because it's just finished like last week.
Okay. So we come to council directly.
Yeah.
The community paramedicine program, very relevant and making a big difference, obviously. That might be something more even suitable for, we can update from the paramedic chief usually once a year. Council.
I think Carrie's got them booked too.
Yeah, I've got them booked. I'm just looking for the.
Okay.
They're coming to council.
Perfect.
So they'll easily, Travis will speak to.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay, perfect. Because I was like hearing him talk about the program. He makes it very clear that this is really needed. So, okay, perfect.
Okay. So move ahead, but just to think of, if you have thought of a delegation anywhere along the way, just let Carrie let us know. Events, I'm going to skip that for the moment because we're running short on time, but because Carrie's got the interim report.
Yeah, so I did send out the interim report to all of you to review, and obviously after today's discussion, I'll be adding to it. Just looking for any feedback you may have. I tried to hit on all of the kind of how this committee came to fruition, was kind of the intro of it. And then I went into things that have occurred that have occurred in the town that for reducing discrimination and advocating for inclusiveness. I got into the delegations we've heard. We've actually heard a really impressive from an impressive group of people since we've had this group. So then I went on to the successes that we've had so far. We've had our pink bench, the inclusive corner, the newcomer event, the basic income resolution, which is probably one of the biggest, I would say, and the development of the 4 pillars. The main part of the report, though, is the items that we want to bring forward to council. So there's 3 ones that are coming, or that I'm asking if this group is receptive to them coming forward. The first being the budget, which was already passed Monday evening, so that's already in there. But that is this group as well as the events. The one that Chris Cutler brought up was to formalize changing the name of this group from Smiths Falls for All to the Smiths Falls Equity for All Committee. And the third is to amend the terms of reference. The terms of reference, when we initially did them, noted the 4 pillars developed by the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. But we've kind of evolved from that, and we've developed our own 4 pillars. So looking for this group's approval and council's approval to amend the terms of reference, denoting our 4 pillars that we came up with that we're working for. And so I didn't include all of it on this, but included on the report will be attached. So will be the SWOT analysis we did that led to the 4 pillars. And under the 4 pillars, all the different items that we've discussed that we want to work on. So I'm going to attach all of those as appendices. So if anybody has any ideas or anything else they want to add to it, if you want to let me know. I think I wanted to bring this forward the first quarter. So I'd be looking to bring this forward. I'll bring it forward to our next meeting in March. But then after that meeting, I'd like to bring it forward to council so that they can see what this committee's been doing and have it formally received by council via resolution. So have a read through it, send me any comments, good, bad, or ugly. I won't be upset. And but I am going to add to it after today's meeting, and after the discussion we've had about priorities, and add obviously these two great delegations we had.
Thank you. Joanne?
Carrie, I haven't had a chance to read through the whole report, but I glanced at it, and for someone who considers himself new to this committee still, I appreciated just even seeing the history and all the things that have happened. So I was wondering, even taking little snippets of each one of those things and putting them out on social media just to kind of get the word out of like what this committee's, all the great work it's done. And then the other niggly I had in my head was around the pillars. I remember there was one discussion we had here where Chris mentioned that pillars might not be the right jargon or language, so I can't recall the entire
Something
conversation.
about it being more circular and having a pillar. It's like if whichever one is listed first, there's the subconscious of like, this is what we're prioritizing. And on the document that we were showing at the time, it was economic sustainability that was listed first. And he was quick to mention that this could be seen as problematic as being at the front. And so I was saying maybe something more circular, and then not having that as like the top left first red.
Thank you for your memory. Because I only had a snippet of it. So
I just remembered it because I was like, that's such an interesting comment. I didn't think about it like that. And I wrote it down being like, good to keep in mind.
Okay.
So I think the health unit must have those circular, you're right. Yeah, you see them and they're much more with the community in the middle and
yes.
Okay.
the image. Yeah.
It's more of a graphic as opposed to.
I have a question about the pillars as well, and I think I'm just having maybe a layer of confusion because I did read the report, and so I have in my head these were the 4 pillars that we were referring to, but then I see in the report here we have the poverty, housing, food security, inclusivity. So I just want to make sure I'm referring to the right pillars of our.
I messed that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. These are the.
Those are the right ones.
Because when I saw this, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm
These
not
were-
sure which ones it is. Okay.
These were the original pillars, and then they were adjusted after the SWOT analysis.
To
those.
those.
Yeah.
Aha. Okay.
We created our own.
Okay. Things are making
We're not following any rules.
No, those were the OG pillars.
Okay. That's why I was like, now I'm not understanding. Okay. Perfect.
And I guess I think the elephant in the world right now we haven't talked about is what's happening in South US. And Elaine made some comments to it, but it's also the erosion or complete destruction of any DEI initiatives across the US. And I think we'd have to be naive to think that wave is not going to hit us. And so I think we also need to maybe keep in mind the work we were doing, how important it is, and things we may need to do to combat what could be pushed back against really much of the work that we are trying to accomplish.
That's what I was hinting at when I said it's not, it's out there, it's very real. It's there. It goes farther. There are organized groups that are trying to get municipal council people elected to disrupt and to be on and to make sure that agenda gets there. It's organized. It's there.
It already happened in 2022,
Yeah.
right? Some places, some people elected. So.
And it kind of ties in too where, there's a really big initiative going on throughout different municipalities where, you see on social media to kind of put your money where your mouth is, right? Like support local or support things. But when we say things like support local or, purchase Canadian, that's a very privileged sentence. Sometimes we can't choose what we buy because we don't have money to choose what we buy. Like going into a grocery store and not looking at the price is a privilege. So I think that's something to factor in too, where
That's a good point. Yeah. And supporting local comes at a higher dollar value simply because they need to charge more because they aren't Walmart. They have no other choice, but it does come with, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm just wondering, going back to my question about the pillars, the notes that I sent to Carrie were really based around the pillars in this document. I'm wondering if I should resend some notes that are based off the 4 pillars of poverty, housing, food security, and inclusivity to make sure the notes really address what the pamphlet will be.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, maybe my notes weren't as
haven't
relevant.
worked on it yet, so yes, please do.
Yeah. Okay. Today.
all the notes that were sent though were very good notes.
Still relevant, but maybe
Yes.
just not. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take a look at what I did write. And then if based on what I read in the report, if I have more, I'll send to you, Carrie, if that's okay. Okay.
I'll forward on to the ladies.
Because a lot of the new parts are encompassed in the old ones too.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
All right. Anything further before we wrap up? No? Okay, motion for adjournment, moved by.
Our name is on there a lot.
Glenn got up a little bit, but anyway, okay, Diana and Nicole. All in
Sorry,
favor?
We're quick to start. We're
You are. Okay, we're adjourned. Fastest hand.
I'm feeling
I just did an exec meeting for my union, and similarly, they're like, motion to adjourn, and everybody, I'm like,
Motion.
That was a great meeting. I love this meeting. Heavy but great.
I love them, but my eye does twitch a lot.
No, I appreciated what Brendan said. We can't lose hope, even though I felt very like it's tough because I think it's also sometimes my